There we go. Let's have a word of prayer. Father, we thank you that we can be here this evening. We ask, dear God, that you guide our minds and hearts as we look into your word. Illuminate us, give us understanding of these things, Lord. We desire to grow and know them and share them with others. In Jesus' name, amen. We're in Romans 14, and we're going to do segment by segment since we already read the passage. And we're going to do Romans 14, verses 2 to 4. And so put one hand there, and go the other hand to Galatians. We're going to read two passages and then compare them.
Galatians 2, right?
Yeah, Galatians 2, verses 11 to 14. Make these pages thinner and thinner and thinner.
Yeah.
Feel like at a supermarket when they make the shopping.
Like
it's like it's thinner and thinner. Man, it's getting harder and harder. It's like, all right. So Romans 14, verses 2 to 4. Rose, would you read that for us?
Romans?
Yeah, Romans 2 to 14, 2 to 4. And then Siam, read Galatians 2, 11 to 14.
Okay. One person's faith allows them to eat everything, and another person, whose faith is weak, eats only vegetables. The one who eats everything must not treat with contempt the one who does not, and the one who does not eat everything must not judge the one who does, for God has accepted that person. Who are you to judge someone else's servant? To their own master they stand or fall, and they will stand, for the Lord is able to make them stand.
Okay, Galatians 2, 11 to 14.
Paul opposes Cephas. When Cephas came to Antioch, I opposed him to his face because he stood condemned. For before certain people came from James, he used to eat with the Gentiles. But when they arrived, he began to draw back and separate himself from the Gentiles because he was afraid of those who belonged to the circumcision group. The other Jews joined him in his hypocrisy, so that by their hypocrisy, even Barnabas was led astray.
That's it. And obviously Cephas there is Peter, the apostle. He's calling him by his Aramaic name. Now here in Romans, it sounds like Paul is saying we should accept each other, and if one person does not want to eat the kosher things, fine. If you want to eat the kosher things, great. But in Galatians, it sounds like he's rebuking Peter for departing from Gentiles and sticking to people who are eating kosher foods and going back into the rituals. Any take on what you think? Why you think what's going on here before I go into it? Is Paul contradicting himself? Has he changed his mind in 7 years between Galatians and Romans? You'd be surprised how many books I read where, I start reading a book, it's like, or an essay. And Paul obviously changed his mind. He's like, okay, I see, I can't read this anymore. They haven't gone far enough. But there are people who obviously believe that. What's the difference between the two passages that you can pick up on?
Is it just because Paul is like passing a judgment on Peter? That's the only thing I'm really seeing, but it's because
He's passing a judgment on Peter, but why? If in Romans he has no problem with it, so far as different people follow different rhythms, why is he then rebuking? Why is he rebuking Peter?
Well, in what I see the difference is it seems like Peter's serving at that moment Peter's serving two masters basically, saying with the Gentiles and then with like I said, with the Jews, yeah? The Jews believe in one way, and that's why I see the difference.
Well, he decided, well, what do you mean? But again, if we follow Paul in Romans, Paul says basically you can follow either way. If you want, you can be kosher. If you want, you don't have to be kosher. So Peter obviously had lapsed into not being kosher, and was but when he saw the other Jews, he felt compelled, being that his own people, to then go back into his way of normally being. Because obviously prior to this, Peter had followed kosher laws. Remember, he's the guy who had the whole Acts 10 scenario where, God shows him, gives him a vision of all these unclean animals. He says, "No, Lord, I've never done this."
But isn't like, again, he's wavering in his faith? Is he denying Jesus again in doing that?
Oh, no, it's not denial of Jesus. Although Paul sees it as a compromise of the gospel and something that endangers the gospel, but it's not because he's got a kosher. It's not the kosher issue. There's a deeper issue.
He's just he's a leader at that moment, and he's going and he's brought the word to Gentiles that that weren't in the law, and he's separated himself from people that not of the law to be back in with people of the laws, and he's trying. And it must have been that Peter was affirming that the law is what's better, what's higher. You're more Christian following eating this way, more Christian if you're doing what I'm doing with my other.
You're definitely on the right track, because that is the issue. The issue is the separation.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't that he was just living kosher life. It was that now he was declaring by his separation from the Gentiles that the law was still valid, and that because for the Jews it wasn't simply that you ate the right foods, it was also who you ate with. You cannot eat with Gentiles because Gentiles by definition were considered unclean. In Romans 14, he's talking about what you eat. But in Galatians, it's about who you eat with. And Peter, by ostracizing other Christians, Gentile Christians, was saying, oh no, the law is still effective. We should be following the kosher rules that say you cannot be with Gentiles because you don't know where they've been. And if they're contaminated, then we're contaminated. And Paul's like, you're going right back under the law. As opposed to Romans 14, where he's actually trying to defend the Jews. Because now, like I said, first the Jews had dominance. And in Galatia, you have a Gentile church where Jews are coming in and trying to influence them to become Jewish. That somehow, in order to really be a Christian, you need to go all the way and become a Jew. And Paul's like, no way. If you go back to being a Jew, you'll go back to slavery. We've been liberated from that. But now Gentiles have become the majority in Rome, and he writes them saying, you've got to be patient and kind to the weaker brother who still follows these regulations. See, again, he sees it as weakness. He sees that living by these kosher laws is a weakness in their faith. But you still don't beat them up. You still accept them. But in Galatians, it is the gospel as a sake. He knows that it's not simply a kosher question. It's that Peter, by his separation, is saying the law is still effective and Gentiles are not part of the people of God, which would be, would just knock down. If Peter had completely won, and it's not sure how much Peter won and how much Paul won, but if Peter had been the victor in the long run, the gospel would fail, because then we'd still be living on this dichotomy that, oh, we're the Jews and we're superior and you guys are over there, we can't even have fellowship with you. Where, Christians now are actually coming together and eating together. And of course, Paul is all for that. And now now in the country, he's trying to make Gentiles sensitive to the weaker believer and saying, when you gather with them, hey, look, if you know that pork offends them, you don't need to eat pork in front of them. It's like you can do it in your house, but why do it in the fellowship? You can avoid it there so as to keep the peace and not to offend their conscience.
Is it, in a sense, trying to stress the importance Paul is trying to make Peter realize that as an example, as a leader, he has to be very cautious on what impression to give.
Mm-hmm. Oh, of course. Of course.
He had to never lose that side of how important he as a leader, being an example.
But Peter, of course, by doing what he did, because he is such an influential figure, a lot of the Jews followed him. And notice that, you normally don't pick up on emotional tones, but there is definitely an emotional tone when he says, even Barnabas. You can tell there's a disappointing note there for him. That he cannot believe that Barnabas, who's such a person who's always been open to others, who was even open to him and brought him into the ministry, would actually follow through on this and separate himself from the Gentiles, knowing that this is not the appropriate. But again, this is the power and influence that Peter had. And in the early church, we like to think that everything is neat, nothing's ever been neat in the church. There's always messiness. And you did have a party of the Pharisees, people who had come to know Christ, but still adhered to all the Jewish laws. Their problem was that they were then trying to impose that upon the Gentiles. And this is what, of course, there's a big debate as to whether Galatians was written after Acts 15 or before Acts 15. I believe that the incident here with Peter and this letter occurs before Acts 15, because Acts 15 is the great council in Jerusalem where the matter is finally settled. And they say, Gentiles are equal with Jews, and they just recommend that you don't do these things. Don't eat meat that's been, animals been strangled, still has the blood, things like that. So they only put down certain regulations to try to keep the peace. But I believe the council occurred after all this, that these things led up to that situation where they finally had to have the first actual church council that ever occurred was Acts 15. And this was the first dispute that had to be settled because of Jews and Gentiles now living together. Any questions? And so, of course, again, for the Jews, it was very precise who they could eat with, what they can eat, and in the manner that they could eat it. Because they had not only to have the food clean, but they even had to have their hands washed, everything. Everything had to be very precise. And this is the way they lived. If you ever get a chance, and you want to just, if you're really like brain dead and you want to read something that's just because it's really difficult to read. It's just boring. It's the Mishnah, which is the Jewish rules and regulations. Oh, I've never, talk about books I can never read. I've only read segments in that book. It's almost like, okay, when you wash your hands, make sure the water hits over here and washes this way, because if it goes this way, then you're still unclean and you got to do this again. And I'm like, oh my goodness.
Do you have to memorize that too?
All those rules and regulations, for just a simple thing as how to wash your hands properly before eating. Because if you improperly wash them, you have to start all over again and wash them again. And that's just one. The book is like this, okay? Of rules and regulations of all things that you can and cannot do. And this is the way they were living. And that's why Paul says, come on. You know that we couldn't keep this stuff when we were Jews. And we're free from it. Why are you trying to go back into it? Or why are you trying to impose it on Gentiles? They're not going to be able to do this stuff. We couldn't do it. How could they do it? But again, they were very precise. For the Jewish people, dietary laws were very important. Like I mentioned Sunday, that was one of their badge of identity, along with circumcision, the Torah, the Sabbath. These are things that identify them as the people of God. But they also became important because during the 160s BCs, during the time of the Maccabees, it became very critical. Because one of the things that the emperor at that time, who was very anti-God, anti-Jewish, wanted to do was force Jews to break their laws. So he would actually, it's like either eat this pork or I will kill you type. And many young Jewish men and women were willing to sacrifice themselves in order to not break the dietary. So dietary laws were not simply all like, oh, we just have kosher rules. In their memory, in their psyche, this is not so far away, what happened with the Maccabees. And it's almost like, when you're little kids, I don't know about you, like, every family has the things. My family growing up, my mom had the stories about Cuba and the struggles and Castro and the Bay of Pigs. And this was part of the psyche of who you grew up being. Well, their psyche is growing up this whole idea of identity as Jews. And here are things that Jews don't do. We don't do, these unclean foods. And of course, they had great examples. Remember Daniel. Daniel, when he's taken to Babylon. He says, no, we don't want to eat that. Let's have our own diet and let's see what happens afterwards. And the guy allows it, and it works out. But this was very important for them. So imagine this was one of the great stories during the Maccabees also. That look at young Daniel. Look at his faithfulness to God, to keep all dietary laws. So it was something very, very deep for them. And obviously for Paul, he had come to understand that this is no longer binding on believers. But again, if certain believers had a weak conscience and they had to live under it, he had no problem with that. He allowed, he said, sure, you know, we're not going to enforce that on them. Any questions? Obviously here it says eating vegetables, but that's not the idea. Although the idea is herbal plants and stuff. It may be that the Jews in Rome may have become vegetarians. So maybe it is vegetables. But the kosher laws don't entail you cannot eat any meat. It's only certain meats that you cannot eat. But the problem was that and I think scholars have it right. The Jews left Rome, and now they're just coming back. Before they had left, when they settled in a community, they had people that took care of the meats. You know, like today, the Jews have people that take care of the kosher stuff, and they only buy from the kosher places. So that's what they had in Rome. Now they don't have it. Now they're back in Rome, and they don't have the meat people that are taking care of meats for them. So maybe they're restricting themselves even more and becoming more vegetarians because they've not been able to reestablish them. So that is very possible. But again, within the actual Jewish laws, although you have things about draining the blood and stuff like that, there are certain meats they're allowed to eat and certain meats they're not allowed to eat. Of course, any meat that in any way gets tainted by idolatry, tainted in any way with other gods, is dangerous for them. So you can see them trying to avoid it as much as possible. They are really back in Rome for the first time in quite a number of years, and they are like the newbies now, and they have to be careful how they live. I'm sure that within a few years they would reestablish, their own places, but right now they don't have them. Any question? So he says, of course, not to treat them with contempt. In other words, don't look down on the weaker Christians, which is the norm. Anyone who believes that their spirituality is superior always has the temptation to be condescending. That is just human. That is normal. If you believe that you're spiritually enlightened and other Christians are not as enlightened as you are, what is your temptation? Pobrecito. They're so ignorant. If they only had the enlightenment that I had, oh Lord, give me patience with these people. And that's really their attitude. And this is the attitude of the Gentiles. That they're like, oh, don't they understand the gospel? And it's like, they're Jews. Jesus is a Jew. He taught them. Didn't they get it? How dense can they be? Right? This is their mentality. So that's the first temptation. The other temptation is the other one he mentions. He talks about the weak, says the weak must not judge the one who does. What is the temptation of the one who's very fundamentalist? To judge the liberal. This one looks down upon the other one and says, oh my goodness, so ignorant. The other one is like, oh, you're going to hell. You're so liberal, you're going to go to hell, you're wrong. That's, again, this is a common theme even today. You see it all the time. I grew up in a church that was very fundamentalist, very legalistic. And the tendency was always to judge people who were not living up to a standard of that legalism. Of course, if you looked at the legalist, if you looked at somebody in my church, I remember when I was as a young Christian, I had the hardest time understanding this passage because in my church, it had been turned around. It had been turned around that the legalist was the strong one and the person who was liberal was the weak one. And so it was made to look like, oh, they're the ones who are so weak. We're the ones who got it right because we follow all the right rules and regulations. We're good Baptists. And it took time for me to realize, oh no, it's the opposite. You guys are in bondage to all the rules, and they're all man-made rules. Because we grew up in legalism, like men have short hair. Nowhere in the Bible you have to go by, but they added all these regulations, and this is how we lived. And Paul would have looked at it as like, well, they're weak, but again, the people who are legalistic or who have follow rules always look at those who don't follow rules as somehow your spirituality is not mature, it's warped, something's wrong with it. Your theology went wrong somewhere because they really can't live with that kind of freedom. But again, Paul's saying we both have to live together. Any question? And he says, accept them because God has accepted them. Period. And again, he's talking to the weak ones at this point. He has to stop talking to the weak. He tells the weak, you may have problems accepting them, thinking they're liberal. But you better accept them because God has accepted them. And then he goes even further, which is the great argument of verse 4. Who are you to judge someone else's servant? I don't like the word servant. It should really read slave, because that's the culture of the time. Back then, they didn't have servants. They're not like a butler. It's like a slave. And basically, this is a very common theme in the Roman world. Although there are exceptions, and I'm not sure if Paul was aware of them. But 99.9% of the time, you don't meddle with somebody else's slave. I mean, if Carlo here has a slave and he decides to beat the living life out of a slave, that's his business. I should not be meddling with him and getting involved in any way with what he does with his property, because slaves are looked at as property. But there were exceptions, like Seneca and certain philosophers who would say, there should be a common decency how you treat people. Even slaves, you should not treat them in such a demeaning way. And sometimes slaves would actually, like we see in the case of Philemon, the book of Philemon, they will run away and then they turn somebody, please help me. You know him, he's your friend, could you intercede? And there are stories like that with Pliny, who had a slave who ran away and comes to him pleading that please help me with my master. And he does actually intercede with him and tells him to be merciful to him, to show kindness as he returns back to him. So, but overall, no, you don't meddle with somebody else's property. So if ultimately we belong to God and we're responsible to God, and in these matters we're not allowed to interfere with each other. We'll see, of course, that that's not applicable to every single scenario, because we're going to get deeper into that. Any questions? All right, let's go to verses 5 and 6. Angelita, would you read that for us?
Wait a minute, I'm lost now. You're picking me on the wrong time.
Oh, Romans 14?
Yeah.
5 and 6, please.
Okay. No, I was close. Some consider one day more sacred than another. Others consider every day alike. Everyone should be fully convinced in their own mind. So, and 6 also?
Yes.
Those who regard one day as special do so to the Lord. Those who eat meat do so to the Lord, for they give thanks to God. And those who abstain do so to the Lord and give thanks to God.
Mm-hmm. And now, so you don't have to turn to it, you'll see the contrast in Galatians also. In Galatians chapter 4, verse 8 to 11, Paul states there, formerly, when you did not know God, you were enslaved to beings that by nature are not gods. Now, however, that you have come to know God, or rather to be known by God, how can you turn back to the weak and beggarly elemental spirits? How can you want to be a slave to them again? You are observing special days and months and seasons and years. I am afraid that my work for you may have been wasted. Again, we see the contrast within Romans, where Paul talks about people considering one day more special than another, and again, having that openness to respect each other. But in Galatians, it's not Jews, it's Gentiles who are trying to be, who are being enforced to become Jews. So Paul's mentality is basically, look, if you're Jewish and you convert to Christianity, you become a Christian, and you want to keep following these holidays and stuff, no problem. As a Gentile, he doesn't see it the same way. So I still have a problem today with Gentiles doing it, because he had a problem with Gentiles doing it. He was basically, look, if you're a Gentile, why are you keeping these rules and special days and regulations like you're a Jew? These things, first of all, were not written for you. You can look at the Old Testament all you want to say, oh, look, all these rules and regulations given to me. No, they were not given to you. They were given to the people of Israel for a particular time, place and time, and that's it. And once that mission was accomplished, there was no need for it to be held on any longer. Wow, people coming late. So.
Is it so? Sorry. It is the song.
Well, yeah, we're in Romans 14. Now, the actual word here, more sacred, is actually not in the Greek. In the Greek, it simply says one judge a day above a day, another judge every day. For some people, there are special days. And for other people, every day is the same. No distinction. You had to get that question in there, didn't you? I was like, I didn't have time to text you back because people were already here. I say, we cannot do this right now, sorry.
It's okay, you can relax.
So we're in Romans 14, and
You can stay there, bro.
we're talking about the distinction between those who follow kosher rules, those who didn't, and we saw the distinction in Galatians, and now special days also. Again, this is another big issue. Again, that Judaism was seeking to impose itself upon Christianity, and Paul, again, that he has no problem. I mean, let's see if I can make it relevant to today. Like, if somebody came from another culture, say the Cubans, and you have certain particular days that you consider special, you would say, oh, no problem. Sure. Hey, if you consider that day, or Americans, July 4th, Independence Day, great. That's a sacred day for you, fine. But don't try to then impose it on everybody else. And somehow, if you don't hold it to be sacred, like I hold it to be sacred, then something's wrong with you. Paul's like, no. So if that day is special to you, great. But don't then try to make everybody else follow that day like it's a holy day, and sorry, no choice, no other way.
But he didn't have a trouble with a Gentile. Maybe he likes that. There's just one Gentile, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not the Gentile decides he wants to follow the Jewish law. Paul had a problem with that one Gentile,
Yes.
or the Gentile.
No, well, any Gentile. Because for him, and this is what he says in Galatians. I mean, Galatians is really a harsh letter. I don't know how it's, when I see people who still when I see Gentiles try to adhere to the Jewish laws, they must rip out Galatians from their Bible. They must have like a Jefferson Bible where Galatians doesn't exist. Because he basically says, look, if you're a Gentile, and you have found the freedom that you have in Christ, and you try to go back to these rules and regulations, he says, you are as good as going back into the world. He says, people who are in Judaism today, for Paul, he would say, they are enslaved to the things of this world, the elemental things. And he actually sees them as gods, the demonic things that are holding them hostage. He says, as Gentiles, you were in that bondage, and now Christ has set you free. If you go into Judaism, you go back into bondage, not freedom. So he would see it very suspiciously for a Gentile to do that.
So are the Ten Commandments for Gentiles or for Jews?
Okay, before I get to the Ten Commandments, the only exception maybe he would make with Gentiles, if there were Gentiles who had converted to Judaism, and then they discovered Christ, and their conscience might be weak. He might give that exception. But a Gentile, the Galatians were Gentiles. They were not people who had converted to Judaism and stuff like that. So that would not be applicable to them. Now the Ten Commandments, no, they're not applicable to us. They are applicable to us under Christ. Remember when I dealt with Romans chapter 10, the law has ended. The law for us now is the teachings of Christ. If you look at the teachings of Christ, you will find the Ten Commandments.
Yes.
Well, almost all the Ten Commandments. You will not find the Sabbath. But you will find the other laws. You've heard that it was said, thou shalt not commit adultery. But I say to you, he even makes it even harder. Does it make it easier? He says, this is the real intent of the law. Because they were keeping the law by the letter of the law. Well, I don't kill you, but I really hate you. And I seek to make your life miserable and hurt you, but I won't kill you. I might even hire somebody to kill you, but I didn't kill you. And that's why he says, you've heard it was said, but I say to you. And he takes the law and gives us the new law. That's why the Gospel of Matthew is critical that way, because Matthew presents Jesus not only as Messiah, but as the new Moses, giving us the new Torah, the new teachings that we're to obey. And when Paul talks about the law of Christ, this is what he means. It is the law given to us, teachings given to us by Christ. That is what dictates to us. Like even Sunday when I was preaching, I was saying, Paul was saying about keeping the law, and he can't meet the Mosaic law because the Mosaic law said, be circumcised. And he's saying circumcision is not important. So he's not talking about Mosaic law, he's talking about the law of Christ. And Romans 10 is the one that answers that perfectly, because first 4 verses says the law is finished. Christ is the end of the law. And the word telos, like I said, it could mean end, it could mean culmination. Either way, it's the end. And now after verse 4, he says, Christ now is the law to us. He's the one who's given us the teachings. So no, we're not under the 10 Commandments.
So like let's say the Seventh-day Adventists, right?
Mm-hmm.
They in the Sabbath, right? They're like everything about the Sabbath.
Yeah.
is that considered a cult, or are they considered Christians? And if they are they sinning?
Well, first of all, I don't know. I wouldn't call them a cult. Normally, when I think of a cult, I think of like Hare Krishna. I think of like a cult is really a group that seeks to brainwash you and keep you isolated from authorities and people, and keep them to themselves. So I don't put like Mormons stuff like on the cult, even though they're still considered cult. I don't see them as cult because they're so exposed to the things of the world that they're too open for me to consider them cult in the traditional sense of cult.
Okay.
But it's not Christianity. It's not a true religion. They are misguided because obviously they're trying to keep the Old Testament.
So, as a Christian, do you consider them brothers Christians, or you just say, well, they're just guys reading, or?
Well, I'm not
That's
gonna
where that's why I get a little confused. I mean, I understand being, not being disrespectful to them,
Mhm.
right? Because that's just
No,
etiquette, right?
of course.
But is it like, what they're doing is wrong, but are they, how do you call it? Are they like, they're faking to be Christians, or they're just misguided?
First of all, if they know Christ is their Lord and Savior, then I would say they're misguided. Again, I can never judge a whole group by one thing, because obviously, if you pick certain Baptists, you might think, oh man, and I'd be like, don't associate me with that guy. I ain't like that. So there's such a diversity of Baptists. I'm sure that there are Seventh-day Adventists who might really believe in the Lord and be saved, but that doesn't mean that you're right about everything. And on that point, I would say they're misguided. But if they believe that they can be saved by keeping the law, then they're not saved.
That's really
I would draw the line there.
That's basically the.
If you're trying to keep the law for whatever reason, just because you feel that, your conscience tells you should keep it, no problem. Hey, you want to keep those rules, you want to keep those regulations, no problem. But once you step across the line and think, if I do these things, I'm going to go to heaven. I'm right with God if I do these things. Then Christ died for no reason. And that's part of the argument of Paul in Galatians. It says, look, if you can really make it through the law, if you can keep the Mosaic law and be saved by the Mosaic law, why did Jesus die? Jesus died because you cannot keep the Mosaic law. So no, that would be the distinction right there.
So that's basically that's where you.
I would draw a line there.
Okay.
Anything that compromises salvation through Christ, and if somebody says, you need to do this in order to be saved, no, you're wrong. Just,
I grew up as a Seventh-day Adventist, so I know they follow the Bible.
mm-hmm.
It's just that they interpret it very literally.
Mm-hmm.
So they want to keep observe the Sabbath, but it's not that they don't believe in Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. It's just that they interpret the word very literally, but they read the same Bible that we read. It's not like they read another type.
Yeah, but the ironic thing would be then, since I'm not at the Seventh-day Adventist, I would be curious how they would correlate keeping the Old Testament with Christ as the new covenant. Because the whole idea of Christ is that Christ has come and that through his blood, a new covenant, and this is the Old Testament. If we were Jewish, we would get this. I would not have to explain to people, wait a minute, how can you keep the Mosaic covenant when there's a new covenant? Even the Bible, Old Testament, New Testament, it's Old Covenant, New. So that's where I would be curious how they can keep the Mosaic covenant when we're under a new covenant. Again, I would say maybe if they have misunderstanding, that really don't comprehend, that through Christ we're in a new dispensation, a whole new thing, and that we're really under grace, not under the law of Moses. And then the law of Moses, if you look at Galatians, the law of Moses, the purpose was to keep the Jewish people where they were and lead them until Messiah came. Once Messiah came, then he would be the lawgiver, not the Mosaic. And Jeremiah, of course, Ezekiel talk about the new covenant, written on the heart, not on stone tablets. Now you'll be empowered by the Holy Spirit to do, because they could not keep the Old Testament. They could not keep the rules and regulations. But now we, through the empowerment of the Holy Spirit, are able to obey the Spirit. But again, that people can be misguided, of course. You have in many groups all kinds of opinions. My only qualification is Jesus Christ. If you say Jesus Christ is the Son of God, died for your sins, and salvation only through Him, okay, we disagree about other things, but we cannot disagree about that one. If they hold that, no problem. Then obviously it's just misunderstandings, and obviously we're humans, we're frail, we could be wrong about many things. But that would be my real thing.
Prerequisite?
Yeah. Other than that, I'm open to humans being humans, and we're we have many thoughts, and we could be wrong, and we could be misguided. And actually, we'll be dealing with that on Sunday.
And just not long ago, what is it, Talos being
Oh, telos. The telos means end.
is that the same as, is it eschaton?
Eschatology?
No, it's, studying Revelations, they mention in commentary, I think it's ESCHATON.
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 Eschaton means last. Like the last things.
Okay, so the word.
That's why eschatology, the study of the end times, the end things, the last things that happen, which entails not only Christ coming back, but obviously death, hell, heaven.
So it's not the same?
No. Telos is just a Greek word that means like goal, where something is headed. It can mean maturity, it can mean the culmination of something, the goal. It has all these kind of meanings. And so in Romans 10:4, it has the idea of either end, the finale where it ends, or culmination, that it was a fulfillment of the law. And I think both elements are certainly there. Any other questions?
You answered the question I asked.
No, I will not answer a question. Everybody looking at me like, why are you answering that?
No, because you're going, as we study, we're going farther and farther.
What is the question again? Please repeat it.
So, our last thing we were talking about, eating food,
Sacrifice to idol.
yes.
You want me to say it? I can say the question.
Microwave.
Okay, food sacrificed to idol, and you go to someone's home, and I mentioned that if they tell you that it has been sacrificed to a god, to abstain from it, right? We're reading 1 Corinthians 10, abstain from it, but you're doing it for their sake, not your sake.
So this person is like a young Christian that you?
Well, yeah, it might be a young Christian who's invited you, or somebody who's not a Christian, a heathen, who's invited you. And so for their sake, you don't want them to think that you're worshiping, because in their mind, you're worshiping God, that God. Now, like Paul says right at the beginning of 1 Corinthians 8:6, which is a beautiful, beautiful passage. He says, we know that there's no God but one, and one Lord, that all the other gods are false. We know that. So we are free. So when you tell me this pork was sacrificed to Zeus, I'll be like, yeah, really? It doesn't affect me, because I know there is no Zeus. But I have to be aware of your conscience, not simply my conscience. And your conscience might be that, oh, he partook of Zeus, he really isn't a Christian. Or he worshipped both gods. So at that point I'm abstaining because of you, not because of me.
It's basically like just trying to avoid like conflicts when you know the answer, you know what to do, but you're not doing it so you're not like what's the word I'm looking for? Making the other person mad for because they'll look at you like, oh, what are you doing? But like you obviously know it's like, I'm just not going to do it to create more conflicts between.
But depending what it is, it has to be a controversial issue. It just can't be a question of like, my goodness, you're sensitive about everything. It's almost like saying, oh, okay, I'm here using the NIV and I have somebody who's really King James. I'm like, oh, okay, I won't use the NIV. But there are people like that.
Yeah.
I'll give you, I had a girl who did that to me once, because I had done something and I was like, and everything I did was like, she was so sensitive. I was like, come on. These are all spiritual problems you had growing up. Seriously,
It's like to a point.
Like if I use the NIV, you feel like somehow I'm not using the Word of God, and I need to only use. So it has to be something controversial. It just can't, because remember, we are free as Christians. Doesn't mean that we're immoral. We are moral. We follow the law of Christ. We don't lie, we don't steal, we don't commit adultery, we don't lose. But there are things that are gray. There is a gray area. And in that gray area, people try to enslave us. People always want us to follow their rules, how they think everything should be done. Now, of course, we all know people like that because we're all married, we all have households, we all know that there are people that, like a wife wants a household, don't put your feet there, and we live by all these rules. Okay, you know what, well, my wife, I'll tolerate it. I'll live, I want to put my feet there, but she doesn't want me to put my feet there. So, I'll live with her rules. But I'm not going to live with every other woman's rules and every other man's rules. That's crazy. But people do expect that. They kind of think that my Christianity defines everything. Always touch a sensitive nerve. Like Adrian's like, yeah, amen, brother, preach it. I hear you, brother. There are people that just like that. They have all kinds of regulations. Like, come on, no.
I think to a point where like you're gonna appease them, but like you're not gonna do everything for them.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Like,
Again, everything we do should be in kindness and love and mercy, whatever. But when you're trying to enslave me to your opinions, no. First of all, I don't do that to other people. I just don't expect them to try to do it to me. Again, if you want it, look, you have a problem eating that pork, don't eat it. But don't tell me I can't buy pork and eat it in my own house.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
So in that, what you said, right? So I'm hungry, right? Let's say.
Okay.
And I say, well, I want to eat. That's why I'm going to eat because I'm hungry. And I'm not offending the person. I said, listen, I don't, I don't believe in this being sacrificed, but I'm hungry. I want to eat this.
No, you don't eat it.
You just don't.
No, he said don't eat it. Because that point, see, the whole point is that Paul says they specifically pointed out to you.
Okay.
They had been sacrificed to Zeus or whatever. So it might be them trying to test you or lure you or whatever, so you don't fall for it. I mean, if you're a host, if the person says, oh, here's the meat, and they just put it out for you, you can eat it with a clean conscience, no problem. But you have to be concerned about their conscience, the fact that, why are they bringing up the fact that it was sacrificed to Zeus? And again, they might be looking at you now as a Christian saying, I thought you guys didn't do that. I thought you guys only worship one God. Now for Paul, of course, these are not issues, they're not real issues for him because he knows that there is no God as Zeus. There's only one God. These things should not offend us. We should not be bothered. But because you're in that culture, that is offensive to that person. So we have to be sensitive to the cultural sensitivities of people.
Oh, because you say something, you're going to offend them. That's what you're saying?
Well, no, because if you eat it, they'll judge that you're not a Christian or that you do worship Zeus, even though you know there is no Zeus.
But what if I tell them I don't believe in that?
Doesn't matter, because they do. We're working with their conscience, not ours.
Okay.
Our conscience is clear. We have no problem with it. The Bible says, you know, 1 Corinthians 8, we know there's no other God. There's only one Lord Jesus. These are all phony things. So we have no problem eating that meat because we don't have those restrictions. But they do. And again, we're being sensitive to the weaker brother, to the weaker person.
So like Muslims don't eat pork.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So let's say when I, in front of my father, I will not eat it.
There you go. You're being respectful. You're concerned about his conscience and what might offend him.
Right.
That makes sense. That's good.
So that's why so that's all right. Not trying to say that I'm not trying to go in there. Well, I want to make believe I'm a Muslim. So I don't want him to believe I'm a Muslim because I'm eating it.
You're concerned about the weakness of his own conscience and how he would view you, because he might not just view you as a Christian; he will view you as disrespectful. Is that what Christianity teaches you? Not to respect your father when you come to my own household and you dare to eat. Why would you eat in front of me something offends me? So you are being sensitive to his conscience. Again, as Christians, we're not just being sensitive to what we believe. We are to love our neighbors. We are to be concerned about other people and how they react. And so, yes, I'm hanging out with somebody who's an alcoholic, ex-alcoholic. I don't touch liquor. Doesn't mean that I don't drink it in my house, because I just don't touch it in that scenario.
So it's both cases. You don't bring something that will offend them,
Yeah.
and you want to eat something that that might make them think that you're not.
Exactly. It
goes both ways.
Is that sensitivity to the people around you, because the people that you're trying to reach to, and of course, like I said, if I was a Muslim, even me, I'm not Muslim. My dad's not a Muslim. My family's not Muslim. But if I came into a contact with a Muslim and I knew that eating pork would offend them, I would not eat pork. I would not say, hey buddy, give me a pork sandwich. You know, I would abstain from it on purpose. Anything that I knew would be offensive, why would I want to do that? When I'm trying to present the gospel and...
But are you telling them, are you going there right now, might you be saying that you recognize them, their God?
No, not at all. I'm recognizing my God. My God is teaching me to be sensitive to their conscience. I didn't read this in the Quran, I read this in the Bible. So, now if they ask me if I believe anything wrong by eating pork, I'll say no. And if they ask me why I'm not eating it, I'm respecting the fact that you don't eat it. And I'm in your house, so I'm in your company. If it was my house, and I'm inviting you, I might be cautious not to invite you if I knew you didn't like pork, but I might do chicken or something else. But if you happen to come into my house and I'm eating pork at the same time when you ring the bell and you walk in, then I'm like, hey,
It's free reign.
you know, again, but we are to be sensitive to each other. That's the main thing. And it is not the teaching of the Quran, it's the teaching of the Bible. I don't know if the Quran would teach us to have that kind of sensitivity to the beliefs of others. And again, for Paul, these are not black and white issues. These are gray areas. That's where we're not compromising morality. We're going to get to that in a second. We're not compromising the black and white issues. It's not like I walk in and, you know, and I see you killing someone and say, no problem. It's all right.
Yeah, exactly.
Nothing wrong with murder. No, not that. These are gray areas. We always think that everything's black and white, but it's not. There are things that are, you know, and we can name a lot of them. We start, you know. But if we start naming them, somebody would be like, no, it's not a gray area. That's wrong. That's wrong. All Christians should do that. Any other comments or questions?
Question.
Yes.
What if you're having the meal and then they come and say, this is sacrifice to Zeus? What do you do then?
After you started eating it?
Yes.
Oh man, you're like one of those. You're like Thomas Aquinas. You know, here are certain objections. Well, I don't know. At that point, I don't know what I would do. Seriously, yeah, that's.
You could get up.
Paul never answered that one, but maybe at that point I might stop if I think that they're testing me or whatever. But again, if I start eating, then I don't know. That's
just kind of like.
But then again, I would say ultimately that's up to you as a Christian. There is no dogma that I can tell you. This is the only. You know, Paul's giving advice so much so that Paul's advice in 1 Corinthians 8-10, if you start reading it, you get all confused. Oh, I can't. What, Paul? What? Because there are certain scenarios where it's okay, certain scenarios where it's not okay. And so that's you know, there's not like a one size fits all. So you might have a circumstance where you're like, you know, you keep eating because you realize, no, you know, I started eating already. I'm in the household. I'm not gonna, just because you mentioned now.
Like, my God killed your God, so I can eat this.
But I guess it'll be offensive to stop eating after they told you and then you were eating and then when they did it, you stopped.
Again, depends on the culture you're in.
You might.
Depends on the culture you're in. You're right. And maybe there's a culture where if you stop eating, it's offensive that you're insulting them that way.
So then you go back to doing what Paul said to do. You know?
Yeah, I'm
You know what I'm saying? So you're being sensitive.
Yeah, exactly.
At all time.
Yeah.
Whether if they didn't tell you at the beginning you were eating, and you have to be sensitive to what they would think.
Yeah.
It's not you said, you know, you could excuse yourself and that's, you know, or you could keep eating, I guess.
Yeah, again, but that's again the freedom that we have in Christ.
I guess that's
If I got dogmatic on you guys right now, I'd be like, oh, wait a minute, that's kind of like very dogmatic for telling us that Paul's not being dogmatic. So we have to be open. See how?
In both scenarios, the scenario Adrian said and the one my dad said like before, well, basically, if someone tells you something and my dad said, you know, if you're hungry, do you not eat or eat? And Adrian, if you had already started eating and then they tell you afterwards, what came to my mind, I feel like there's a correlation to what Christ said in Matthew when he's saying, you know, it's better to, you know, lose your arm than if it causes you to sin or something like that. Because I feel like in those cases that, you know, if you're hungry, it's better to starve than to do something that goes against, that I think that's against who you follow. And it's not, I don't think it's that we eat this because we don't eat this because we follow God, but I'm not gonna eat this because it was sacrificed to an idol.
Mhm.
You know, so in both cases, I see that it's like I would see that it should be to stop eating or to refrain from eating.
Within a household, if they tell you, because see, the truth is that in this culture, in the first century, most of the meat that you're eating was sacrificed to a god. This is just the way it worked.
Mhm.
The meat would have been offered in Temple Zeus, and then it's taken out to the parts of it for sale are taken out to the marketplace and they're sold. So any meat that you're taking home, the likelihood it had some sort of religious thing, because it wasn't like today where, you know, religion and society are completely separated the way they are. That didn't exist. Religion and society were intertwined.
Mhm.
So yeah, you know, that's why he says, well, if you go to the marketplace, well, the marketplace is right next to the temple, because the sacrifice happened here, meat taken over here, sold over here, even eaten over here. So he says, don't eat it there, because obviously people are going to think that you're worshiping Zeus. But if you buy it and take it home, you can eat it. If you go to somebody else, you know, he has to go through all these regulations. Now, ultimately for Paul, this is like nonsensical, because he does begin by saying, there is no other God. We are free in Christ. This should not, but he understands that it's because of the weaker Christians that we're trying to be sensitive not to do these things. Not because of ourselves. Look, if I'm abstaining because of your conscience, not mine. Doesn't matter what God this is offered to. I can eat it.
though?
It's not a sin.
No, it's not a sin.
Well, sin is about me me trying to destroy your conscience. If I'm trying to make you
so like
stumble.
what I'm saying, like, I'm just saying, you know, Jesus is talking about a sin.
Like, look, I know this meat was offered to Zeus, and I know that Siam is a Christian. He's got a weak conscience, and I'm like, hey, buddy, hey. I'm sinning.
Right.
Because I'm
That's
purposely trying to hurt him. I'm purposely trying to, you know, or even like we're going to say, I try to make him fall into it also. Because I believe it's okay to eat meat. I look at Sam and go, dude, what's wrong with you? Christ set us free. Come on, eat it. And eventually he ends up doing it, but he goes against his own conscience. I'm sinning against him because I should respect his conscience.
Yes, so you abstain, I think I said, like, that's what I'm saying, you said, I'm abstain from both. Yeah, well, that's your right to do.
No, but
I don't think.
I'm saying for a specific reason, not because I understand that everything was most likely offered up in a sacrificial way to an idol of some sort. But I'm talking about in those specific situations, it was told to both people that this is offered to this God.
Yes.
So I would see that as sinful because it's idolatry at that point. You know?
Well, no.
We don't believe in that God.
No,
Yeah,
see-
I know that exactly, but if we partake in it, then exactly what you were saying, that if we were to partake in it, it would give the impression that it's that we follow that.
No.
Only because of their conscience.
Exactly.
Not because it's a sin to eat this meat.
We know this.
Like if I went to a marketplace and I knew that this meat had been sacrificed to Zeus, I bought it, took it home and ate it, I'm not sinning. Because there is no Zeus. There is no other God but Yahweh. All the other gods are idols, they're not real. So I'm not sinning, I'm just eating meat. But if I'm with somebody else who's sensitive to these things, and they're not mature like I am, they're not strong like I am, then I have to be sensitive. I have to care about them, not just about myself. You know, love your neighbors, love yourself. I have to be concerned about them. So yes, if I come to our household and say it's a meat offered, and the guy points out, oh yeah, this is from Zeus sacrifice. Oh, sorry, I can't eat. And at that point, maybe I would just eat some vegetables and something simple. But I won't touch the meat. But again, most meats in that time was idol meat. Lucy, you had a...
No, I just wanted to emphasize because I think he was confusing. Eating the meat itself is not a sin.
I know.
Even if it's been offered to idols, you just sanctify it, bless it, it's fine.
Exactly.
But there might be somebody maybe who just got saved and they were taking this meat previously and worshipping idols, and they don't expect you to eat it as a Christian.
Mhm.
So being cautious, being sensitive to their status.
No, I understand that point. What I'm saying is that if you go against that, that's what I'm trying to say. In those two situations, that either you're hungry, right, and that sacrifice, the meat is offered to you, or you had already eaten and they inform you that it was sacrificed. Saying that it would it seems that it would be sinful to carry on. If you would just say, well, I'm hungry, I'm going to eat, or I already started eating, I'm going to carry on eating. Once you know that this, if I wasn't hungry or if I hadn't started eating, I would say no, because they would assume that I'm kind of endorsing what they believe.
Mm-hmm.
So you would say no in those situations, but now because of these other conditions, you would say yes to continue. I think that would be sinful. That's why I'm seeing that as, because you would say no in one.
If they never
circumstance.
mentioned that a sacrifice to Zeus.
No, I'm talking in both scenarios they mentioned it.
Mhm.
So it's like this is sacrifice to Zeus, and you the Christian are saying I'm hungry though. I
Mhm.
want to eat. You
Mhm.
should abstain from eating,
Mhm.
regardless if you're hungry.
Okay, but so you did say that.
No, you said-
I
Yeah, but
did-
again-
I know that, but that's what I'm trying to say.
But
It's
again,
like,
if
it
you're
wouldn't
there,
be
you're not going to
sinful
starve because obviously you're just not going to eat that meat. There's more food
Yeah.
available. You can have, like I said, you can eat vegetables. You can have a salad. You can have whatever. You don't have to eat that meat. The reason is again, and the issue is not the meat. The issue is the conscience of the person telling you this, and the harm you're doing is not against the meat or yourself. It's against them. I can't harm myself because first of all, eating meat is not a sin. Killing is a sin. Adultery is a sin. Eating meat, sacrificing idol is not a sin. This is a neutral ground. And so as a neutral ground, there are times when it's okay and times when it's not okay. You know, as opposed to adultery. Adultery is wrong. There is no scenario or adultery. Well, if you find yourself with someone who... No, there's no scenario. Adultery is all wrong. Murder, it's not like, well, you know, I just found myself in a position where I just had to kill the guy. No, murder is murder. You just can't find some scenario, you know, you kill the person. But this is like a neutral thing, where there's not really right and wrong. And really it's not really about you. It's only about you if you have the weaker conscience. If you have the weaker conscience, obviously a weak Christian who feels this is not right would never go to the marketplace and buy meat. Maybe they would turn to becoming vegetarian or find, you know, like a Jewish kosher place where they could buy their meat because they'd be afraid.
I think the only, like, for what you're saying is like the only sin by eating the meat is actually if you believe that, like, oh no, this is for Zeus. Like,
Yeah,
that's
right.
Yeah, like.
If you do that, if you believe
you
in your
actually-
heart
That's the only, but.
that this is really dedicated to Zeus, and if I eat this, I am worshiping Zeus.
Yeah,
You
that-
are sinning.
Mhm.
And that's what Paul's going to get to, that everything has to be, like he says, you have to be, all of you have to be convinced in your own mind. You have to be convinced whether it's right. You have to know in your own mind whether it's right or wrong. Not anybody else's, not my opinion, not anybody. You have to believe. If you believe it's wrong, don't do it, or you are sinning.
That's exactly what you said.
That's where, in the first part you say don't.
Mhm.
In the second part, you have to do that. You have to think like that. Hey, you'll stop if you say, hey, wait, I'm sinning,
Mhm.
right? Or you'll continue because you know you're not.
And either way, Paul says all that matters is that, you know, that whether you are eating this meat or you abstain from eating this meat, that you can still give thanks to God for the food in front of you and eat it. If you can't thank God and eat in peace of mind, something's wrong. Something's definitely wrong. But again, it's only wrong within your conscience, not within the meat itself. And I love the fact that, of course, Paul did say these things because, like I said, he does mention that these people are weaker. It's not, you know, but they still have to obey their conscience, and we have to respect their conscience. Any other questions? And that's why that part where it says, and whoever abstains does so to the Lord and gives thanks to the Lord. Obviously, not that they abstain from eating, but that they abstain eating meat that is sacrificed to idols. Verses 7 to 9. Carlos, you got the Bible there? You think you have the Bible there?
Sometimes, yeah.
7 to 9?
Sometimes. For none of us lives to ourselves alone, and none of us dies for ourselves alone. If we live for the Lord, and we die. And if we die for the Lord. So whether we live or die, we belong to the Lord. For this very reason, Christ died and returned to life, so that he might be the Lord of both the dead and the living.
Amen. What's that?
How is he the Lord for the dead? How is he the Lord for the dead?
Oh, because whether you're actually breathing or you've passed away and you're in heaven,
Yeah.
he's still the same God. He's still your God. The dead means those who have passed away, not that they're non-existent. Obviously, it can't be for God the non-existent. But obviously, anyone who's in the Lord, anyone who's passed away. But again, it goes to show here that we are not autonomous. We are not an island. We are not independent. Our freedom is a freedom that is in Christ and related to Christ. Everything I do has to relate to Christ. How I live is related to Christ. What I eat, what I do, everything is related to Him. There's nothing where, Christian freedom doesn't mean I get to do whatever I please. Doing whatever I please was bondage, which means that I ended up in sin. Christian freedom is that I'm living in the Lord and doing what the Lord desires. And that relation is always there. My relation with other people is always there. Again, we don't have this mentality of like, well, I am my own person and I do whatever I please and who cares about anybody else? That's fine, you can say that, but that's not Christian. The Christian is sensitive to the needs, to the desires of his Lord. The Christian is sensitive to the needs of others around him. So they're always, all those things are always working with us. And the Lord always takes precedence in our lives that whatever God desires of us is more important than what we may desire for ourselves. Questions? All right, go on. Here we go, verses 10 to 12. Lucy, you want to read that for us? Chapter 14, verses 10 to 12.
You then, why do you judge your brother or sister? Or why do you treat your brother or sister with contempt? For we will all stand before God's judgment seat. It is written, as surely as I live, says the Lord, every knee will bow before me, every tongue will confess to God. So then we will all give an account of ourselves to God.
Amen. Everyone stands before a judgment seat of Christ. The word here for judgment seat is the word, I haven't written this word for a while, bema. Yeah, I'm sure you remember the bema seat, which makes a distinction between what's called the Great White Throne Judgment. Non-believers will stand what's called the Great White Throne Judgment in the book of Revelations. And they'll be judged for their sinfulness and rejection of Christ. The bema seat is the place where Christians will stand before their Lord and answer for their behavior as Christians. Not for your salvation. Yes, you're saved. Yes, you're going to be in heaven. What kind of Christian were you? How did you behave as a Christian? What did you do? What did you say? How did you live out your life? And we will have to give an account. And again, the account ultimately is to Christ. And although here it says to God, we know in Scripture that it is Christ and who stands as the representative of God in judging. And we see examples of that in the Bible. Any questions?
Not sure if it's in Matthew or is it Luke, where it talks about the master who goes away. Like he gives 3 different people money and they did different things.
Mm-hmm.
And the one guy, of course, hid his in front, and it said that, just paraphrase, I can't remember.
Yeah, you got it.
Said that when the master came back and he reprimanded him, right? It talks about like taking from one to the other.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it says that, that the guy who did nothing but it was saved, but I guess his reward was less, and the guy who did more got reward.
Mm-hmm.
So this is like the same.
Yeah, that's the basic idea.
But it talks about taking from one to the other.
Yeah, well, the idea is that if whoever has and takes what God has given to him and multiplies it, even more will be given to him. So you took the things that God had given you and you invested them and you multiplied it, and when you faced the Lord again, you came up to him with interest. And because of that, your reward is even greater and more is given to you because of that.
They're talking about the gifts.
Well, I'm not sure exactly what those rewards will be and what will be granted to us.
The things that
Talents?
yeah,
The
but
talents?
they're gifts.
Mhm.
A talent is a gift from God. It's
Yeah.
not-
Whatever, again, it's a parable, so more cautious when I go to parables. That's why and I don't want to impose what Paul's saying here upon what Jesus said there, because Jesus obviously is talking also within a Jewish context, which Paul's not talking. And he's talking more about how they also related to Messiah. And we're going to get to that when we get to the Gospel of Matthew and see those little nuances. But Paul doesn't have that. I think a better passage is 1 Corinthians 3, verses 10 to 15.
I thought he was talking about a bank right there. Jesus.
About one?
Invest.
Something they will comprehend. Wait. Not good, man. We lose our investment. That's not cool.
You said 1 Corinthians.
1 Corinthians 3, 10 to 15, I think it is.
By the grace of God has given me.
1 Corinthians?
3, 1 Corinthians 3,
10 to 13?
10 to 15.
I laid a foundation.
Yeah, can you read that for us, Luciano? 10 to 15?
By the grace God has given me, I laid a foundation as a wise builder, and someone else is building on it. But each one should build with care. For no one can lay any foundation other than the one already laid, which is Jesus Christ. If anyone builds on this foundation using gold, silver, costly stones, wood, hay, or straw, their work will be shown for what it is, because the day will bring it to light. It will be revealed with fire, and the fire will test the quality of each person's work. If what has been built survives, the builder will receive a reward. If it is burned up, the builder will suffer loss, but yet will be saved, even though only as one escaping through the flames.
Amen. And that's a good passage there for Paul's idea of those kind of rewards and stuff, because obviously the foundation is Christ. He's the one that we build on. Any ministry that is done as Christian, whatever ministry, whatever gifts, whatever God's given you, whatever you build upon is ultimately on Christ. But the question is how you build. You know, and of course that talks more about the motives and things like that. You know, if I let's say I'm serving the Lord, but I'm doing it for the wrong reasons, or I'm not being faithful in the way I'm serving the Lord. Well, I'm still saved, but all that I was establishing gets burned up. It gets destroyed. So I don't receive a reward. Although I am saved, because I'm saved by grace, I don't receive anything except maybe a rebuke from the Lord for my mistreating of things and misuse of things.
How do you serve the Lord for no reason?
Oh, simple.
Right?
You know, I help Siam here. I'm trying to help him, you know, to grow in the Lord. But I'm doing it so people will look at me and go, "Oh, what a great guy he is." You know, I see somebody struggling with money, you know, financially, and I hey, buddy, here. But I want people to see it because, you know, I want them to know I'm helping out financially. Again, I'm doing it for the wrong reason. It's not enough to do good. This is why Paul in first. I love the fact that I can do Paul. I can't really do like every time I read Paul, I have to wonder, am I quoting it correctly? But when I'm quoting Paul, I know what I'm doing. 1 Corinthians 13. You know, I'm good at quoting. I'm not good at memorization of quoting. I can go to it and show it to you. And Paul really stresses that idea of motives. 1 Corinthians 13 says, "If I speak in tongues of men or of angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have faith that can move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and give all my body to hardship, that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing." The motive is all there is to it. Because people may do very wonderful things, but all for the wrong reasons. I mean, I remember somebody who had been helping someone else. I mean, really financially helping them. And then there came a crisis where the person wanted that person to agree with them and support them on an issue they were going through, and they could not morally agree with them. And out of their mouth came and said, "Well, why have I given all that money to them?" Bingo! You just gave your hand away. So the reason you were giving financial help to that person was because you were trying to buy them. So when the time came, they would support you in whatever you wanted to do. Well, that's immoral. So any good reward you were supposed to get from that, you're not going to get. What I do love about, and here I can relate to the teaching of Jesus, because I do know this very well in Matthew 6, where Jesus does talk about, you know, the Pharisee who loves to give and wants everybody to see and stuff like that. Says, I love what Jesus says. Jesus says, don't take that from them. Don't take that glory from them. That's the only glory they're getting. That's the only reward they're getting. So don't. They like the spotlight. let them have it, because you know what? That's all they're getting. There's nothing awaiting them in heaven, because they're doing it all again for the wrong reasons, to be seen by men, to be admired by men, rather than because they love the Lord and they want to serve the Lord. Any questions? But here the bema, of course, that will stand, and again, this idea that although it's being referred to as God doing it, we know that it's Christ who will be the one who does judge. And N.T. Wright gives a good example in Acts 25, where he talks about Paul standing, it says, before Caesar's tribunal. But they're in Caesarea, not Rome, and it's the governor Festus. But because the governor Festus speaks for Rome, he speaks for Caesar. And therefore, when you stand before Festus, it's like standing before Caesar. Christ speaks for God. So when you stand before judgment seat, it will be Christ there. And he'll be the representative of God, the Father, to judge all people.
How is he going to intercede for us in judgment? How is he going to?
Well, he's interceded already because we're saved. This has nothing to do with salvation. This has to do with what we did with our salvation. Yeah, two separate issues completely. Yeah, he is our advocate. There's no doubt about that. But we're not standing. When we stand before Christ, we're already redeemed. We're already saved.
So like when he says rewards, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you'll be judged and you'll be, rewarded accordingly, right? I guess that would be.
Mm-hmm. Whatever the rewards are.
Yeah. Could somebody be confused? I mean, could they, like a weak in faith? Could this a weak in faith, even though they're doing a lot of things because they want to make sure the rewards.
Well, again,
Would
but
that
their
be-
motives will be wrong.
May just fear of God.
No, but their motive might be, again, if they're doing it to get reward, that's still the wrong motive. You're not doing it because you love God. It's not because, it's like, I'm not doing it because I love God and I love my neighbor. I'm doing it because I want a bigger paycheck.
Yeah. So basically, that's well. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that'll be like really the answer, because your reward should be, everybody's reward will be the same if you do it with the love of God.
Exactly.
That's it. So
Exactly.
I don't have to worry about whether you're going to get a bigger reward than I am, because if I'm
Well,
doing it for
We're worried about that. Again, we're trying to compete and there's no competition.
right.
Because again, whatever's not done from love, it
So
burns
basically,
up.
what it's telling you is when you're not doing it from love, that's when you might not get a reward.
That's right.
Not that if you're doing it from love, doesn't mean that I'm going to get a bigger reward than you. I'm
No.
going to get.
If I'm doing it from love, I'm not even thinking about you getting a bigger reward than me.
There's,
I'm not thinking about reward at all.
Yeah, I'm not.
The contrary, I'm trying to do it in secret and do it, like Jesus said, don't let your right hand know what your left hand is doing. It's like when you're doing it for the Lord, you're not trying to, worry about the transaction. Oh, like, hey, today I helped 4 people. That's 7 brownie points for me. You're not thinking at all like that. You're just living
So
your
if
life
you're doing
as a
it, so
Christian.
if you're doing it for the reward, you might.
Once-
That's when you're not getting.
Once
it.
once you're doing it for the reward, you already lost the reward.
That's it.
To whom much is given, much is expected.
That's true. That's also
So it's not
applicable.
just the motive, but it's also the amount of,
Yeah, but the motive, the most important.
volume of what
So it
you
means
use
that
and
you-
what you receive.
You are accountable to what you have. Meaning, God's not going to judge you for not being a worldwide evangelist like Billy Graham. Because that's not the gift he gave you. But the gift he gave you, that's what you have to be faithful with what he gave you. And you have to answer for what he gave you. So again, the one who receives 5 talents, there's one who received 10. Billy Graham got all these things. Means Billy Graham's going to be judged for all these things. Billy Graham can't get away with saying, well, Johnny over there doesn't do much, so if I can just sit back and do nothing. No, because God gave you 10. You're accountable for those 10. Now you have to go multiply them. And that other person just has to be faithful. All you have to do is be faithful where the Lord put you. That's all that matters. It's not a question of who's got what, doesn't really matter. Not at all. On the contrary, one of the things that, speaking about Billy Graham, one of the things he says is don't be shocked in that day. When we're expecting to think the great heroes of the faith and we're expecting to see all these wondrous people, that you find some little old lady who was devout in her prayers, receiving awesome rewards that were like, who is she? I don't know her. Nobody knows her. Because she was just being faithful to God and what God gave her. You know, while other people may have had extraordinary gifts, because some people have extraordinary gifts, and they stand out. And some people don't have extraordinary, they have very gifts that are more hidden and unknown. But again, are they faithful? That's all
Was
that
that
So, my-
judgment,
Wait, go ahead.
would that judgment over there in the den or whatever, would be like in a stadium, everybody there seeing that?
Well,
Would it be a private one?
that is
Because
that is
interesting.
that
to
is
think.
imagery. Well,
That is a what?
that's an imagery.
Uh-huh.
Obviously, I don't really believe there's going to be a Bema seat, which is one of those guys are thrown that. The way I look at it, let's say it's like, you know, let's say like this, and then the seat stands out like this, and the person stands over here, and the person is down there while he's making judgment. I don't think that's literal. I think it's a metaphor for how it'll be. But again, we won't have that problem because we will be redeemed. So my ego won't be there. I will be a new creation, in my view, which is something I've had to develop, especially on Facebook. People don't comprehend this. I believe that we are going to partake of the nature of God. I'm not going to have an ego that is tempted or frustrated or angry or sinful. I'm going to be one with the Holy Spirit. My nature is going to be one with God. So I will hear it as correct rebuke, and I will accept it pleasurably from my Lord and be happy. And whatever reward, I will use it pleasurably from my Lord and be happy. Because there isn't, again, yeah, if we thought of ourselves right now the way we are right now, I stand in front of the Lord and says, George, I'd be like, I'm being humiliated. But if I share his presence already and his sanctified existence, I don't have shame like Adam hiding, because I am saved. And I accept the rebuke as something that I did in my flesh, something that was wrong. But again,
Because I think that God can handle anything, and I'm a firm believer that God can do anything whichever the way, and it will be the right way. Because I don't think he has to have, let me put it this way, a show. He can do it from independently of everyone and be as just and everything, and deal with you at the same time or separate times or whatever, without having to.
that's right. Well, again, maybe
You know
he'll
what
do it
I'm
that way.
saying?
I mean, I don't know how. I mean,
No, I don't know.
I can't answer how. Maybe you're right. Maybe he'll do it that way, where it's, you know, because he could right now. He could speak to all of us in our mind and pass judgment on us completely without the rest of us knowing what he's saying to us. Yes, he has the capacity. So yeah, if he chooses to do it that way, sure. And I'm sure some people will be like, "Oh yes, Jesus, please." But when you read the scenarios, it does look like there's some sort of acknowledgement that of failure, and acknowledgement of, again, what kind of reward do you have if it's hidden? It was like, you know, okay, see, I'm going to give you this, but I'm not going to tell anybody else, because, you know. And then it's like, you know, I don't think, there seems to be a public atmosphere to it, but who knows? It just seems very public. Even the parables seem very public. You know, you came, well done, good and faithful servant. You multiplied, here's more. You know, it seems that kind of, or is an open acknowledgement. You know, otherwise, what is the reward? You know, it's like giving the Olympics. You know, it's like, here's the gold medal. Don't tell anybody.
Pride wouldn't be our part of our approach to those things.
So
Pride would have been gone out of
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. That we will have no problem standing before Christ, because we will not share that sinful inclination in ourselves anymore. We will be free from all that. So we will accept it in the Spirit without any problem. So a rebuke will be acceptable to us, because we're not going to be like humiliated, or we know that he loves us and he does this for our good, even the correction.
Good night.
Good night. Good seeing you guys.
I was waiting for you to say that, because I can't remember which letter I read it in, but someone talks about that you know, there's gonna be different crowns you receive.
Oh yeah.
And it's impossible for anyone to see that he has a crown and I don't. Everyone that is Christian, that is saved, is going to see, oh yes, good, he deserved that crown. He's definitely getting it. He got all the crowns. I knew he was getting all the crowns, because
awesome, yeah.
this is what it should be. No one the whole thing, that was, I was just waiting, but I can't remember what letter it was in.
And
but-
my mindset is gonna be like David. It says, I'd rather be a doorkeeper in the house of the Lord than to be in the tents of the wicked. I'll be like, I made it. Woo, yeah. That's like,
Yeah.
you guys can do whatever you want to, man.
I'm just happy that you're in the party.
I got invited to the party, man. I'm in, man. That's it. You know, like, I'll be the doorman. I don't care, man. I used to be a doorman. Sure, here. Yeah. You know, I'm happy.
Of what she said, too much is given, much is expected.
Yes.
I mean, okay, in the parable of the talents, right? Whether one received 3, one received 2, and one multiplied it, it's the guy that received 1 and hid it. That's really where
That's
he
bad.
wants you to,
Yeah.
that one, if I give you something, I expect something.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's really what too much is given. It's not the quantity.
Yeah, and
of it's given.
he points out the inconsistency because even that servant says, "Oh, I know that you're a rigid master, you know,
Yes.
reaping where you did not sow and demanding." It's like, if you really believe that, if you believe that I was such a demanding master, you would have worked hard.
And it
Make
would
sure you
be,
gave me what I deserve.
because you would be, if Jesus gave you a talent, you'd be like, oh, you know, oh my God, no, you want to share it with the world.
Exactly. And
That's
that should be
really-
the
that's
mindset.
really-
But there will be believers that, for one reason or another, will not take what God has given to them and use it.
Well, then again,
You
that'll
know,
be.
and they will be accountable for that.
Right, then that's when they're saved and they're
Yeah.
still invited to the party.
Well, they're still saved because their salvation is by grace, not by works.